All right, so let's start from the intro. So let's introduce yourself to the audience so that they can know you.
Okay. By the way, what is our audience? Because just a second, I'll open the calendar. Yeah. So you're actually trying to. Oh, right. Session about learning. So, yeah. So my name is Oleg Nenashev. I actually started my career in hardware engineering. I spent time doing research and then developer for microprocessors. I started doing a lot of quality assurance and automation for that. And well, once you fix your pipeline, you own this pipeline. So this is how I ended up maintaining CI instances. I kept doing so, switched to full-time administration for big companies, and then started contributing to open source. And then eventually I became a maintainer of Jenkins. Jenkins is still my favorite automation framework. For more than 10 years I've been contributing there. I participated in many big initiatives, for example, configuration as code, Docker integrations, with the cloud native Jenkins, pluggable storage, and a few other bits. I still like community. And later I switched more towards observability and automation, well, rather cloud automation, deployment automation things. So I worked a bit with Captain, OpenFishy is a Fishy flag management framework. And right now I'm not sure what's exactly for me next, but most likely it will be an open source too.
So are you currently without any work, open to work, right? Because you mentioned that.
Exactly. I would say I'm kind of including my interviews by now. So unless you have a super bright idea about open source, etc., and you can do the whole cycle in 1 or 2 interviews, it's probably too late. Hopefully I'll start something in March.
Yeah, so I saw your profile. You have so much experience in open source and in the community. So I just want to take some guidance from you so that you can guide me. I'm just starting out in the open source community. I started out in the link free, first of all, if you know about Adi Jaude. Yeah. So his project, I started from his project. After that, I moved to the Kubernetes. The first thing that I've contributed my first pull request. After that, I'm also contributing in the Dean Lofts or Loftwa. So his book is Linux for Pirates. So I'm contributing to this book every day. So my question for you and for the that will help the audience is that how are you finding the right tooling for DevOps? Because there are a lot of tools that are present in the DevOps, and how you can select these tooling for your work, and because it will take a lot of time to select according to your work. So how do you select these?
Yeah. Well, in my case, I'm quite conservative, so I prefer to take tools that reached a certain level of stability and certain level of adoption. I like experimenting and tinkering at home just for the playground, but if I'm to take something for production use, there are basically 2 options. Firstly, it's widely adopted in the community. It has good documentation, it has a good track of stability, and has clear roadmap. Another opportunity, I can take something in-house or something created by me or something where I contribute actively if I'm sure that it's going to work. I still stick to the first domain and try to choose tools that are actually quite stable.
All right. So what would you prefer to in the when you will start contributing to the open source? Because I'm a beginner and I just started out. Let's say from a beginner's perspective, what would be someone's goal to contribute to the open source? Like whether a person should contribute to the company's project, like Upbound, like Terraform, HashiCorp, or what you can say a person should contribute to the independent projects like Kubernetes. So in terms of getting a job, I'm just confused about because there are a lot of projects that are present in the market in the open source community. So in order to get a job or to be involved in the community, what is the right choice to select a project or to be contributing into it in order to make a community and build reputation and what you can say get a job eventually at the end?
Yeah, well, any approach can work. If you target a specific company for your job employment, for your job, then of course taking an open source project driven by this company makes sense. If you're rather more generic, if you're more focused towards learning, then you would rather take a look at the project with wide adoption. Kubernetes, it's probably a good example, though I don't think that Kubernetes is the most easiest thing to contribute to. Well, it's easy to submit a small patch. It's definitely not easy to make a difference and to build a portfolio around Kubernetes unless you want to dedicate full time. So my recommendation there would be rather to either join a project of a specific company which you want to join. If it has healthy community, etc., it would be a good direction. Or another way is to actually join a relatively small but fast-growing project. Plus, it can always be a combination. For example, if you like observability, if you like, let's say, OpenTelemetry, you don't have to contribute to OpenTelemetry directly. You can rather contribute to observability of the toolchain you use. And basically, by that, get into a wider ecosystem and actually get quite a lot of visibility among companies using these tools. So it's not necessary that you actually join a big project, not at all.
Yeah, I was talking to Chris Short. He also said that small projects, if you contribute into it, the chances for giving you a role in that project is easy as compared to if you can contribute to the Kubernetes or Docker or big projects that are present. So many people are in the Kubernetes, in the open source. They try to just attach a name of a big project to their names. Like let's say if they just write the documentation in Kubernetes, then they call themselves the Kubernetes contributor. So these things I don't like, because just by contributing in the documentation side or just by correcting the typo, it doesn't mean that you are making an impact in a big project, because there are a lot of things that are going on in a big project. So just by
let's actually distinguish that, because it can be misunderstood. Contributing to documentation is actually a very important part for an open source project. There are so many hackers, so there are not so many good documenters. For example, helping users to adopt the things, explaining bits, especially helping with first user experience is super important for open source project. So if you are willing to contribute to documentation, you're definitely welcome, and it's important. But it still raises a question of whom do we call a contributor? Because if you submit one type of fix and then move on, it's hard to call you a contributor. For me, firstly, to be considered contributor, you need to be a community member. So someone who is present in the community, who participates there on a regular basis, and who also does contributions on a regular basis. This basically creates a sustainable track of contributions, whether they are in documentation, user experience, just reporting quality issues, submitting user experience feedback. All of that is super valuable for an open source project. But any open source project is interested to having someone who contributes consistently. Even a big patch that you submit and then move on, for example, in Jenkins, I wouldn't qualify you as a contributor. Well, we would be happy to call you a contributor, but I wouldn't rely on you in terms of a community, and definitely a single contribution, unless it's something super massive, definitely wouldn't raise my interest as a potential employer.
Yeah. So my thinking is that maybe let's say if I contributed too much in the documentation, then what I think is that there is a need to shift from documentation or to other things like coding, or this is the thinking that I have, that because I have contributed too much in the documentation, and currently I'm doing it with the project that I mentioned, and from after that I realized that these are the things that maybe I'm not interested in it, and I should focus more on coding. So this is depending on each of the person's interest. So yeah, I agree with you, but depending on my interest, I'm more interested to be doing the development stuff. I know this is not that much easy, especially in the big projects, but as far as I know, that I should try my best to be involved in this development. Yeah.
Yeah, so for your interests, it's totally reasonable. And actually, when people come to the communities and ask how to contribute, where to contribute, following your interests is probably the best advice. If you like documentation, sure. If you like design, sure. If you like coding, the same. It's perfectly fine. You're not committed to do 100% maintenance. It's not your job, so you are free to choose what's the best for you. It can be, and it's actually there is a talk which I always refer from WASDOM, a story of a selfish contributor. I can share a link later. And I think that it's a really interesting talk from the community perspective. And from participant perspective, because everyone who comes to open source, they have particular interests. They might be just addressing their own need, fixing their own bug, building portfolio, mentoring people, whatever. But basically, everyone has their own interests, and from the community standpoint, allowing a person to actually follow their interest is the best way to have a regular contributor and a community participant. So, yeah, if you like coding, just do that. You are totally right that for bigger project is definitely difficult to get something integrated into the core part, just because there is a lot of additional restrictions, there is a lot of complications. Usually there are much less maintainers that it would be needed to handle all pull requests. But you can always find something on the peripherals. For example, there could be additional models, additional libraries that are being used by the same core, etc. So there are plenty of opportunities for coding.
All right. So, how much time should someone commit to an open source project if he wants to? So, what will be the commitment of contributing to it? So,
well, you can find reasonable contributions for all time you have. If you have 5 minutes, of course, you can fix a typo. You can improve some bit of documentation quickly. If you have 1 hour, etc., probably you can try implementing unit tests, etc., or maybe a really small feature. If you have days, weeks, and months, it's a completely different discussion. But yeah, open source community would benefit from any kind of contribution, but it depends first on how much you want to dedicate. And if you dedicate, you need to be conscious about the things you can do. So if you have 1 hour a week, probably it's not the great time to make your career, to build your career towards Kubernetes maintainer. It requires full-time employment by a company, which is okay. But if you just want to do some sporadic contributions, maintain a kind of peripheral component, whatever CLI tool, it might be viable. So basically, choose based on your availability. But yeah, all public roles in big communities require significant time dedication, and this is something you need to be conscious about.
all right. So you answered my questions well. And the last thing I will ask you is that let's say if I start my own project, open source project, how can I promote it? Like any project that I want to start, and what should be the promotion be like? how can I promote it in the community so that they get involved in it and they contribute into it. So yeah.
Mm. So first of all, you need to get some initial adopters. And for that, actually, whatever works, your own social media, maybe local meetups, it would be a good launch pad for your project. Once you have some initial users, once you get some initial feedback, I guess it will keep you busy for quite a while before you can go to wider audience, especially if you work alone. And once basically after addressing feedback, you can try to get wider reach, maybe try to get your user base to recommend it to someone. And eventually, once the project grows enough, then you can actually start participating in various podcasts, various conferences. But to do that, you already need some kind of adoption and some kind of usage track. All of us have dozens of pet projects. Some of them will never see light. Some of them maybe will have a few hits on GitHub during their lifetime. But if you want to build something big, you will definitely go through many stages, and for each stage, the approach to outreach would be completely different. But initially, it's perfectly fine to present locally. So you may have a kind of hacker garden. You may have a local meetup where basically everyone welcome. You could present what you do. You can probably get some initial feedback, users, and your own social media is definitely a way to promote. So start from there.
All right. So yeah, anything for me to ask me, because my questions are covered now.
So where do you contribute at the moment?
So I'm contributing in the a book that is Linux for Pirates. It is done. It is written by some my friend that is named Dean Lofts, if you know about him. So he is a DevOps engineer currently, and he's working. He's living in Australia. So I'm currently contributing to his project and setting all these things that setting multiple things that are present in his book and contributing into it, adding more things into it, managing it. So yeah, this is my work, and I just started my contribution in Kubernetes. But what I saw is that it is a huge project. So at the beginning, I was not able to understand it. So, but one person from NI, and what you can say that his name was Shan. He basically gave me some good first issues, and I was able to work with it. So yeah, that was my first contribution. After that, I'm busy in studying more about Kubernetes. But that was a question that I asked you, so whether a person should contribute into the big projects, individual projects, in order to get a job, or into a company's project that he is interested in it. So yeah, I got my answers. So I asked this question from another person also. So the answer was same, that it depends on your choice, that what you want to, whether you should be a contributor for it's your passion, or you're just trying to get a job in a specific company by introducing yourself through open source. So yeah.
Yeah, that's totally legit, and all the way it would work. I'm currently browsing through the book. Well, nice graphics there.
Did you find it?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm just thankful to him, because from his help I was able to contribute into this project, and I was not sure how to contribute, how to start it. So he really helped me, and I was able to contribute into it, and I learned a lot from this. Yeah. And recently I completed the 60 days DevOps series also, and he said that you should apply those concepts, or you should write those things in my book also if you want to. So it will be a win-win situation.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other thing?
Yeah. Nothing from me. Yeah, I'm still browsing from through the books GitHub, but as a project, it definitely looks interesting. Why not? Actually, having such aggregators is a viable way to contribute because there, especially in the cloud native space, there are so many technologies nobody could even think about learning them, or at least some of them. So yeah, any kinds of grouping, any kinds of helping newcomer users to choose where to start from should be a really good contribution. Yeah, I've seen this repository.
Yeah.
Thanks for the link.
Yeah, so I was trying to contribute into Kubernetes in a localization way, but I came to know that my language of choice is not present in it. So basically someone said that you should build a community around your language, and from then you can start contributing to Kubernetes, because at first you will be just one person to start, but it will not be that much easy, and you should build a community around that project. So yeah, but I was not able to translate those things at first, because I just wanted to take my first step and send the first PR. And yeah.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm quite skeptical about localizations in open source because usually it's super difficult for a project to maintain even one version of the documentation, English one. And when you start creating new versions, we had the same in Jenkins. For example, we have user interfaces with built-in documentation in so many languages. People try to build a website in Chinese, in Russian, and ultimately most of these efforts were not that successful because it requires not just finding a lot of people to kick it started, but also massive effort to maintain it in an up-to-date state. So arguably, if your community can read technical English, which is not that difficult, maybe you don't need to have documentation in a native language. So it can be useful for some very specific parts, maybe for some blog posts, quick starters. But regarding the main documentation, I would rather recommend focusing on one version of documentation. And English became kind of international language by now, so we can basically just use this one and improve it together. It would make more benefit than creating a localization for specific documentation.
All right, so okay, so that's it. Anything you want to say, or because the time is up and 30 or 20 and only 5 minutes are remaining, so if you want to say anything.
Yeah, and I have an interview in 5 minutes, so I should just grab some water. But yeah, thanks for reaching out, and yeah, I'm always happy to chat. If you want to record something, if you want to go something specific, please feel free to reach out. But yeah, I believe that open source is definitely a great way to study. My last 2 jobs were about open source, and I found them through open source communities. My third one will be the same for sure. So open source definitely works for those who want to build a career around it.
So did you find your job through open source, or just at first contributing to it? So or just
for all offers I currently have and for all discussions I currently have, definitely my open source profile is a massive leverage. Apparently it doesn't always work, especially on the current market. Especially, my previous position was senior director, so half of the companies immediately think that I'm overqualified, though I actually want to be in an individual contributor role. I have Russian passport, which doesn't help in the current environment, and we have a crisis on the market. I need 80% employment, etc., etc. So finding a job has been quite complicated in the recent weeks, but I think that I will be still able to complete all the process within 1 month after going public with the search.
All right, so let's take a screenshot and then we will end this session, right?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Cheers.
All right.
Okay. Nice to meet you.
All right, so see you again. Thank you for helping me and thank you for the session and your time. See you again. Goodbye.
Yeah, thank you too. And don't hesitate to ping me if there are any specific questions.
All right.